Welcome to Design Thinking Games, a fantasy and user experience podcast. Each episode, your podcast hosts, Tim Broadwater and Michael Schofield, will examine the player experience of board games, pen and paper role-playing games, live-action games, mobile games, and video games. You can find every episode, including this one, on your podcatcher of choice and on the web at designthinkinggames.com.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated on the Olympics. I'm always fascinated about where they choose to, like, where it's going. And, it's spitted out like 10 years in advance, like 8 Olympics forward. And I think in 2028 it comes back to the U.S. It'll be in L.A. And then I'm always, as a designer, a part of me is always excited by the, what fonts are they using? And they change the logo each year, and then they have like a character that they make and a logo for both the Olympics and the Paralympics. And I think personally, like the Olympic branding and their website, their web app and experience is always the cream of the crop when it comes to what is the future of like web design or what's happening right now, right?
What? Wait, yeah, really? I'm gonna have to look this up now.
Their websites are phenomenal, and I think NBC's, they always kind of throw up one. I feel like theirs is always going to be like just like the most responsive, the coolest, just great with content. But then that's NBCOlympics.com. But then there's also, the core Olympics.com, which is actually by the Olympics Committee. And so I'm just always kind of impressed about how you can search it, and then also how it's implemented, like as it trickles down, right? So if you have like a Roku TV, right, you can go onto a Roku TV and it has like iconography for all the sports. So you can actually go to an Olympic section, and then you can just go to like gymnastics or sailing or whatever, and you can then get those highlight videos and content. So it's a lot. It's like, I think they say it's like 17,000 hours of content that's recorded, that's baked into those 17 days that is the Olympics. And then it's just how it's routed out to YouTube. And then now streaming services is a huge part, because what NBC's doing with Peacock, and there's now a Peacock Plus, which is their premium subscription. So you can watch the replays and the recaps, which are they're very constructed, and they're very like, here's Lester Holt or Hoda Khattab, or like someone just like framing it and telling you to. But if you don't want to watch them, you can go to the live streaming. But of course, it's in Tokyo, so you'd have to watch it at 4 a.m, to get to the live streaming. But then to get the live streaming access, you have to have like a cable network, and you have to have like all of the ESPN channels or the NBC Sports channels, and it's just like this big to do, and it's a lot of media, a lot of backstories, and it's just like planned years in advance. And so I'm always impressed, with how its reach and how, kind of what all it touches media web wise, and game wise too. And I know that there is a lot of Reddit and Twitter anger out there, because once again, what people are reminded of is, that NBC is kind of paid for like $1.7 billion, all the U.S. rights for airing, right? And so they have total control of what we see in the States. And there are literally very few options to see if you don't go through NBC,
Planning out and putting together the Olympic design is one of the biggest design projects historically every 4 years. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, design professionals. Not to mention, what you have to imagine is a Bible of design patterns that have to, well, I don't know if they have to be like honored by or trickled down through all the different streaming services, through all the different websites. Because the other thing that is true about the Olympics.com is that it parts of it has modules that can be pulled into other news sites in the same way that I think of NPR, where there's, you know, an NPR grandparent website, but there's all these other individual local public radio stations that are NPR affiliates or pull in NPR programming, and that all comes down through, you know, these, you know, this kind of like modular design, both in terms of like look and feel, but also in terms of the technology about how they pull it into their websites. And the Olympics looks like it's doing the exact same thing. And I just did a cursory search, and I found like whole pattern libraries of the previous Olympics, which is fascinating. And also, of course, like Reddit is going nuts about the bad UX of of the Olympics, at least on the UX design subreddit, I guess, because I guess they're doing some like really cool things, or arguably cool, quote end quote, scare quote, cool things about like projecting speeds and scores and stuff like that onto the event itself as they're happening, in the same way that like Monday Night Football does, you know, or
exactly. And then if you're watching it and you're like, hey, I just want to check out, or I just want to watch the opening ceremony, like every couple of minutes, like you're slammed with all of these plugins for NBC's fall lineup, or shows that are only available on Peacock, and so I feel like the UI is like amazing, right? The UI as it extends to like YouTube and Peacock and NBC or Olympics.com is great. It works. The patterns are there. However, it's the service that I think is the total disconnect for people, because what people want, right? The user experience here, what the expectation is me as an average whoever in the world. Let's say I'm super interested in skateboarding, which is new this year in the Olympics, and I just want to go somewhere on my web, on my PlayStation, on my computer, on my phone, whatever, and watch. I just want to see the finals, you know, or I just want to see the qualifiers, or I want to see the. And so the expectation is on that part of the user is always the same it's not every 4 years, it's every 2 years, because the Winter Olympics are exactly the same way, that, hey, I just want to go and watch what I want to watch. And if it happens to be live right now, I'll watch it live. But if it's already happened, I just want to be able to watch that feed, you know, and fast forward and rewind in it. It's the same mechanics that we get with a DVR that you have like on Comcast or something, or if you have Hulu or YouTube or Netflix, you know, the user wants to be able to go through and, you know, kind of just go to the part they want to see or go to the content they want to see. But there are so many obfuscations and layers where it's like, NBC's like, we're going to create all this content and backstories of athletes, and then we're going to do these solo side stories, and then we're going to do these individual like wrap-up stories, or we're going to do all this, and it's just not what people want. And it's the same every 2 years, every 4 years, if you're a summer or a Winter Olympics person, and it's always the same. And the only way to get that experience that you want is to pay for it, and pay a lot.
Oh shit! Yeah, I only learned. I feel awful admitting this, but I only learned there were even Olympics pay-per-view options this year, because frankly, as you know, as long as it takes to hit my radar with this kind of stuff, a lot of, you know, the people I follow were griping about the cost of the pay-per-view, and I legit had no idea you had to pay-per-view the Olympics. If that sounds weird, because like growing up, it's always been, you know, public access television or something like that.
It's changed definitely over time, right? And then the other piece of it, it's always complicated when it's, you know, depending on where it is in the world, you know. And then when it was Sochi for the last Winter Olympics, like it all happened in the morning. Like you had to get up at 6 a.m. or you had to have, the only option really was which, NBC is a company that's owned by Comcast. So you have to go to Comcast. That is literally the cream of the crop. You have to have Comcast cable, you have to have a DVR, and you have to have all of NBC and ESPN Sports. That is legitimately the only way that you can watch anything and everything whenever you want and fast forward and rewind and go to it. They have that locked down. That is the only way to experience it in the way that everyone expects and how it should be.
Sure.
There's just, you have to pay and you have to go through that forced content. And it's it's so off-putting, right? It's so off-putting.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I just happened to find a discussion about like the jobs to be done of providing an Olympic level Olympics experience. And I kind of want to run these by you to sound if this sounds right. And if you were to imagine, like if this were your job, if you were, King Olympic Design, and it was your job to provide this service, these would be the jobs, presumably, that your users have. And I wanted to run through this just to get your thoughts, but also because I think it illustrates the difficulty in terms of the design challenge here, particularly because these jobs are going to be very subjective as I describe them. So here they go. First, the big one. Watching the big events live in crisp and clear coverage without buffering. There's a little like subthread here about how interesting it is that the idea of buffering or any kind of lag within the last 10 years was pretty reasonable, but we are now at a point where given the popularity of streaming services and how robust that infrastructure is now, that lag is now in the 21st century deemed unacceptable for an event of this magnitude. Does that ring true?
I agree. Yeah, that's an infrastructure thing. It's kind of like we have.
It's a convention. You get, like if you can stream, the latest Black Widow like through Disney Plus or whatever. Maybe it's not the same thing because it's not being filmed real time. But the idea is that the stream now not everybody, but many people have N number of streaming services in their house, and for the Olympics to, the Olympic design and delivery service has to adhere to that convention, right? It can't be old. It can't look like, PBS or something like that.
Yeah, webcasting has existed forever, right? And so it's basically you're just delaying a couple of minutes or seconds or, 5 minutes or whatever. And then it's just, once it's cached, you're streaming it. So the problem is not so much the webcasting, right? The problem is the two problems that kind of are further down the stream from that are the infrastructure of our cable networks in the world. If you've talked to anyone who's actually gone to South Korea before,
much faster,
and oh my God, they have national FiOS, so that's it's paid for under their taxes, and so it's a utility and it's considered that way. And so there is no, you have total best access all the time. But then the other piece is this rights kind of purchasing, right? And so when you have the partners of the Olympics and Paralympics that are Samsung, Toyota, Visa, Intel, Panasonic, Coca-Cola. The big people. Their content, of course, they're paying for it,
sure,
right? And so, their filters, their content, their lenses, their product is what is placed. And people, so I think what's happening that we've seen, right, is the opening ceremony. What's all over the news is that the opening ceremony for the Olympics was at the lowest it's ever been in 33 years. And
you mean the attendance or viewership? Yeah,
the viewership is the lowest that it's been in 33 years, which is, out of the last 15, 16 Olympics, it's the worst, especially in a time where everyone's at home
Right.
and they're trying to like stream, right? And they can't. And so that speaks to a problem, right? That really speaks to, kind of the situation that's there. It's a disconnect between, it's not always, I feel like, well, I understand what the stakeholders want, I understand what they want us to build, but is it really what customers are going to put up with? And so what you're going to see now is it's all going to be low. We're going to have 2 weeks of low attendance, essentially 14-ish days, and it's over. And then people are just going to watch it in reverse, right? They're going to go on YouTube and watch it, or they're going to go watch clips because it's kind of inaccessible and unwatchable as it's going on. And I think it's different when it's last year, COVID-19, and we're seeing HBO Now or Disney Plus like vying for like, oh, we're going to get certain movies and we're going to get features and add it, but if you play premium, you can watch Mulan early, or HBO's like, no, if you just pay us, we're not going to screw you. You can watch our theater releases as they get released in the theater, And so like there's still this kind of, there's always been this competition for attention. It's an attention economy. But now I just think it's like you've kind of buried yourself. Some part of, I think everyone is wondering, is this what NBC is trying to do to leverage Peacock or to get more people on Peacock subscriptions? So if they get all the people to pay $5 for just this month to watch it live. But this is the funny thing. The live is not live. Live coverage, if you just have internet and you don't have cable and you can't watch it through Hulu. You can't watch it. You have to pay for that live TV option,
Gotcha.
like through Hulu, or you have to pay it through Peacock or something like that. And so you're not getting live TV. And then also when you're watching it, it's not like ESPN where it's just like, hey, we just set up the cameras and it goes. And what event announcers we have there or who the people are that are really there physically.
Right.
No, you're getting a remixed kind of cut show. So you're paying for like, okay, Lester Holt's coverage of it that has been cut up and pieced together for you over a 2-hour block on NBC every night at 7. And no one wants that. Everyone just wants to watch the sport. They don't want the commentary, or if they do want the commentary, they don't want broadcast news people doing it.
A huge part of like games and the design of games is the
format in which it's given, the product, bandwidth, the integrity, the UI.
The productization of it, right? I mean, the fact is that none of us can play games until that's marketed toward us and that there's some sort of like monetary value surrounding it, right? So there's this like one of the things, it's kind of like at this kind of marketing or monetary or I think what you can imagine is that, here are the Olympic Games. It's a world good, right? It's supposed to be this great uniter, maybe not uniter, but, kind of a peaceful exercise internationally where countries can put their best faces on and do something other than politic for a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, I think what we have is a super example of the creation of like a hardcore anti-pattern specifically to pump up the subscriber numbers to Peacock Plus, where they are funneling access or making access difficult specifically to create these points of friction that's going to make them a little bit of money. You see this in games like all the time. These are microtransactions, these are whatever, right? And it's just interesting where I think it's valid to talk about the games, and that's what the Olympics are. They're
No, I agree with you, and how I equate it is not microtransactions. How I equate it is, as a user or viewer, and I love the Olympics. I'm actually in Summer Olympics. I love that their karate is this year. It has never been before. This will be the first year for karate and the only year for karate. Sumo was supposed to be in, but it is not. That has chapped a lot of people. That has upset a lot of people internationally. Because judo's been in for like 40 years.
Sure.
And it's like, come on, I thought the goal here of the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, is to like building a better world through sports. And that's excellence, respect, and friendship, and then, the inclusion and, kind of everything. But what it feels like as the user experience is like for the games is that it feels like if I did not buy early onboard access, or like I didn't buy the dynamic, or what is it called? The director's cut edition, or like when a game comes out, when you buy it, you're like, oh, you can buy the game, or you can
pre-order the deluxe.
You can pre-order the beta, or you can pay $200 to get the deluxe steel case with a map and a poster and a t-shirt. And it's like, if I didn't do that, then I don't get the experience that I kind of expect. That's what it feels like mostly to me. It's just like how this happens once every 4 years, and it's like people just want to watch their sports or watch their athletes compete from their hometown. There are real people involved in this, and that's what people like about it. You don't need to sell us the story of the real people.
Yeah,
we know they're real people, So why is it so difficult? Why it just kind of feels that way to me.
Yeah,
I don't know if it feels that way to you.
No, I mean, like what it feels like is that there's like a product team who were like, hey, how can we milk the shit out of this, particularly because we we control all of the bottlenecks, right? So they can like hook them all together into like one long funnel from product A to product B to product C, all of which they own. And in part, I bet the confusion alone is accidentally having people subscribe to services that's then boosting the money. It's what it is like probably a case study in how, and maybe like what people hate about product teams, right? And I think that's really important, because this is the kind of shit that gets in the way of everything. Like like I said, like there are all these articles about like the Olympic design system, the amount of work that goes into like creating and facilitating these services. Just like you said, the jobs to be done of the users are pretty clear, crisp coverage, being able to find out when the big name athlete is competing according to the country you care about, right? Keep you up to date about the country sports that you care about. Stuff like that seem pretty clear. And from all intents and purposes, it looks like these provisions totally exist, except, the top of the funnel part, just getting to it is a minefield.
So it's like they kind of know that people want to watch it, but it's like, but they're still not giving, them, I guess what they're wanting, but they're getting close to it, and so it's just, it feels, as from a user perspective, it just feels disingenuous. It feels like I can't play the game because I have all of these filters or things I need to pay for. Yeah. And I just want to get to the game and watch the game, Is there, so I think, we
can all put on our armchair business administration hat and see what these the big sponsors want out of the Olympics and how they are how they've decided to get it. What can fans of the Olympics do? Can they do nothing, right? Because there is a pretty, what seems like strong iron grip monopoly over how footage, like how the footage is controlled.
I think it speaks for itself. If the opening ceremony was the lowest viewership it's been in 33 years, then people are just going to wait until it's done, and they're going to watch it after the fact, and maybe just keep the counter to see like where the medals are. Like, oh, are we good? Are we ahead? How many medals do we have?
I have a question for you. So I think we can see like maybe like how the Olympics got here if we kind of imagine. We simplify, but we kind of imagine that like, hey, you know, the IOC, or at least like NBC and Comcast, have been designing around the key performance indicator of viewership, right? And so what brings in most viewers? Well, judo and not sumo or whatever, you know, like all of these decisions about what sports get footage, what sports get brought in, how people get, like, you know, like what, you know, like how things are aired, how things are cut up, or in the fact that, you know, perhaps, you know, in 2021, how things have ended up in a series of single sitting digestible clips, which they may discover is exactly not what people want. But we can all imagine that, you know, that sort of a viewership KPI is sort of at the middle of this. Do you think that that indicator tanking is going to mean an improvement in 2 years, or do you think it's going to have an effect?
Yeah, I don't. So there's two issues there, right? Like thematically, there's the issue of the IOC and the sports, and there's also the issue of like how it's being delivered and consumed, right? So the sports that don't get into the Olympics create their own global kind of things anyways, right? And they have world games that go around, and so there just seems to be so that's one issue, right? That I think a lot of people aren't happy with. To like, why don't you cycle in new sports and get rid of older sports, and some things stay forever and some things don't. But then the other piece is like when you're talking about if viewership is the KPI, if it's the metric that people are looking at, well, yeah, I'm sure the way that BBC does it is completely different than NBC. And so I feel like, you know, at some point, I don't know if those are going to change. If you're doing something that's not happy and you're losing viewers, then the show gets canceled. I mean, that's what it is. You know, it's like you may think this show is the greatest, but I mean, when viewership drops, it's time to change. Like, what are we doing wrong? And I feel like we now more than ever live in a time period where people don't want commercials. We know that from DVRs. People will pay not to see commercials.
Yeah.
They will pay to not have to watch them. And they just want to get to that content that they're looking for. And the advertising part is just kind of like a fly that's in the way that's just bugging you, you know? So I think we'll have to see how this works out.
I churned from the Olympics who knows how many years ago. When we started chatting before we recorded, you know, we were talking about the Olympics, and I was like, man, I haven't cared about the Olympics in such in a certain amount of time. And boy, it's fascinating to like look at from like the outside in as like, you know, I was just talking about like, oh, how product people ruin everything. I'm a product person. So, you know, I'm like, you know, I'm thinking about it's interesting to watch. And I'm very excited to see what like, you know, hashtag design Twitter, and the product folks on the internet and the blog sphere have to say.
You'll have to see how it shakes out.
Like it occurred to me because now that you mentioned that, hey, skateboarding is now an Olympic sport. And, you know, years ago, and still, I guess they have the X Games, and those are crazy to watch, right? But I wonder if there's going to be a time in our lifetime where esports ends up in the Olympics somehow.
I don't know. That's a pretty good question because, and then also with that, like a lot of what the people don't understand is like the duplicativeness, right? So it's like volleyball beach and volleyball indoor.
Yeah.
Like, why would we need two volleyballs? You know what I mean? And then I think it's kind of like, I think there's like equestrian, dressage, eventing, and jumping.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so 3 horse events. And then freestyle wrestling versus Greco-Roman wrestling. And you're talking about stuff that's been in there since 1920.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, can you rotate that out and like give something else a space? But then also with that is, you know, every time Olympics comes up, it also is a game. And it's there. So there's an official Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 video game, and it's out on, you know, PlayStation and Xbox and Switch and Steam and Stadia. And it is very much this experience that is, you know, people want about it. And then also what comes out with that are all the spinoffs like Sonic, Mario Olympics, or you know, other stuff like that. But what people want is like, I just want to make up my character. I want to compete and do well and see how well I do, you know, and just qualify and do well and keep playing and get better times. So I think, you know, the gaming piece here from the gamer experience piece, right, or the player experience, is that people want to people like competition. They want to compete and be healthily with other people. They want to get better. They want to improve. And when you kind of apply that to like watching or just the Olympic Games, like real sports, like it's tough. But I mean, we're rooting for people. We want them to get better. We want to play and we want them to succeed.
Yeah.
And everyone globally, it doesn't matter if it's like a figure skater from France or it's like a gymnast from Romania or like, you know, a track person from Nigeria or you know, kind of a Jamaican bobsled team or whatever. You know, we all cheer when they do well. And when someone fails or gets injured, we all cringe because we don't wish that on anyone. And so we are all here for it because it is the sports that does kind of unify, you know, that brings us all together. And, you know, I feel like at this core level, which is building a better world through sports and like sports brings people together, that will always be the same, no matter if the coverage or the sponsorship or the product team screws it up, right? So I feel like the desire will always be there, the sportsmanship part of it, right? And that's what I think is kind of maybe getting a little lost.
Thank you for listening to the Design Thinking Games podcast. To connect with your hosts, Michael or Tim, please go to designthinkinggames.com, where you can request topics, ask questions, or see what else is going on. Until next time, game on.